Most DJs today learn using controllers and DJ software. And this makes total sense because modern DJ gear is incredibly powerful and it's a lot easier to learn on. But before all of that existed, DJs had to mix using two vinyl records on two turntables. I'll be completely honest, mixing on vinyl is difficult. It requires real hands-on control and a lot of practice. And today, you definitely do not need to learn on vinyl to become a great DJ. But as a former DMC champion, I have spent tens of thousands of hours using vinyl and using turntables. So in this video, I'm going to show you exactly how to beat match using vinyl and real turntables step by step. My name is Blakey. Let's get into it. Now, before DJ controllers and DJ software, this was the only way that you could DJ. And it's a real art form that requires lots of practice. But I'm going to show you exactly how to do it properly, step by step. Now, these turntables are the Technics SL1210s, easily, in my opinion, the best turntables ever made. And in the middle, I've got a very simple two-channel mixer. And the only thing on this mixer that we're going to use is the volume control for each deck. So this fader here will control the volume of this deck, and this fader here will control the volume of this deck. If you're just starting out mixing vinyl, I recommend keeping it as simple as I am with this mixer here. Just use a simple two-channel mixer with two volume faders, and this way you can actually focus on learning how to use the turntable and the pitch control to beat match two tracks together. Now, if you've been watching my channel for a while, then you'll know that all of my other DJ tutorials are taught using DJ controllers and modern DJ software. But I've actually been DJing since I was 12 years old, and I started using real turntables. And I even won the UK DMCs in 2004 before the digital era. I was using real records, real needles, no Serato, and no DJ software. And to get to that point using turntables, I had to practice a crazy amount. But this video is not going to be teaching you how to be a DMC champion. I'm simply going to teach you how you can take your own vinyl collection and beat match from track to create a seamless mix. I'm going to be using some 90s New York house tracks. So let me put one of these records on and show you how the turntable works. So on each turntable, I have a slip mat. That's this thing right here. And this goes on the platter on the turntable. And then when you press start on the turntable and it starts to spin, you can hold this slip mat and the platter will continue moving underneath. And this is going to be super important for learning how to beat match. So let's put this record on the deck. Let's press play and let's take a listen. So we're going to be mixing these house records, and a track like this is perfect for learning to beat match with because it starts with some very clean drum hits. Back in the day, all dance music records started with drum hits like this. Very clean. And this gave the DJ an opportunity to mix this track in using the headphones and then start bringing up the volume to introduce that track. So that meant that dance music tracks on vinyl back in the day tended to be 5 to 8 minutes long, whereas nowadays a track would be 3 to 3.5 minutes. And one of the main reasons that dance music tracks were so long back in the day was to give the DJ a good opportunity to mix the track in before bringing up the volume. So just next to the start stop button on the turntable, you've got the 33 button and the 45. Now, which one of these you select depends on the record. So this is a 33 RPM record. So this record is now playing at the correct speed. If this was a 45 record, you'd press the 45 button here. Now this is a 33 record, so putting it on 45 sounds super weird. So we're going to keep this on 33, of course. And then on the right-hand side of the deck, you've got the pitch adjustment right here. Now this is going to be the most used part of the turntable when you're beat matching, because this is going to allow you to get two tracks running at exactly the same speed, which is the core skill of beat matching. So take a listen to what happens to the track when I adjust this pitch control. Moving it this way will make the track faster. So this right here is +8, which means the track is playing at +8% of its original tempo. If you want the track to play at its original speed, then you just put the pitch control into the middle and then this green light comes on. So this is the original tempo of the track. Now you can also go down to -8. Let's take a listen. Now, to be honest, a rule that I've always stuck to is to try not to play the track at below 0. If you need to play the track around here, then that's okay. But personally, I don't really like to have the track any slower than that. Because hearing a track playing slower than intended, for me, just doesn't sound quite right. I have no problem with playing a track at a faster speed because that kind of adds energy to the track. But I find when you play a track down here, it just doesn't sound right. I don't like it, and it's kind of one of my rules when it comes to mixing on vinyl. But I've seen many DJs playing vinyl who mix tracks in at a slower tempo. So there's nothing wrong with it. It's just for me, playing a track slower than 0, I try not to do it. Now, in the middle of the deck, this right here is called the spindle. And this is what the hole in the middle of the record goes over. And the spindle keeps it in place. But the spindle actually has a really good use when it comes to beat matching, because you can use the spindle to kind of push the record forward. Take a listen to what it sounds like whilst I'm playing the track, and I use the spindle to kind of pinch it to speed it up. This is a technique that a lot of DJs use. So you could hear there that it does make a micro adjustment to the record, and it allows you to reliably speed up the track just a tiny amount to get the track back in time. And it also works by pushing the spindle the other way. Now, to be honest, I'm not really a spindle user, but I feel like I'm in the minority there. The majority of vinyl DJs that I see actually do use the spindle in that way, to speed the track up or to slow the track down. Now, one of the biggest limitations of turntables compared to modern DJ software is the fact that you can only go up to +8 on the pitch and down to -8. Now, this means that you can only beat match tracks which are within a certain tempo range. You're not going to be able to mix seamlessly from, say, house music into drum and bass because there just isn't enough range on the pitch control. So if you want to perform a continuous mix of music, you're going to have to stick to music of a similar BPM and likely a similar genre. And this is part of the reason why, historically, track selection mattered more than anything. But having said that, the limitations that turntables give you, they do actually unlock quite a lot of creativity, because sometimes the fewer tools you have, the more you have to think outside the box. Now let's talk about physically controlling the record. So let's press play. Now right here, this is called the platter, and I've stopped the platter manually by putting my hand on it, and I've stopped the record playing. Now take a listen to what happens when I let go of the platter and allow the track to play. What you're going to hear is actually the torque of the turntable picking up to go from completely still to playing the track at the normal tempo. So you could hear there that it actually picked up the speed very quickly. And this is because the Technics SL1210 has a really high torque, but a lot of cheaper turntables, they have a much lower torque. So on a cheaper deck, you could hold the platter still like this, and then when you let go, the track is going to take a lot longer to get up to speed. Now, it is totally possible to learn to beat match on turntables with low torque. That's exactly how I learned. Back in the 90s, I started on a really terrible pair of Newmark blue belt drive turntables, but I learned to mix no problem. It was a bit more difficult, but if you're using cheaper, low torque turntables, don't worry, you can still learn all of these skills. So now I'm going to put the needle back to the start, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to find the first kick drum. There it is. Now, one of the main advantages of having a higher torque turntable is when you're holding the record still like this, when you let go of it, the track is going to start playing almost instantaneously. And this is also because of the slip mat underneath the record. So even though I've got my hand on the record and the record is still, the platter underneath is still spinning. And that's because the slip mat is allowing the platter to continue spinning. So did you hear how instantaneous that record started playing at the original tempo? Let's take another listen. So this is why slip mats are so important. The Technics SL1210 comes with a very thick rubber mat, and it would be impossible to hold the record still whilst the platter is still spinning if you were using that rubber mat. So now let's let the track play again, and I'm going to show you a few more ways that you could speed up and slow down the record whilst it's playing. Now, the technique I often use is I often drag my finger against the platter to manually slow the track down. Take a listen. And the great thing about that is you can slow the track down as much or as little as you need to by just applying more or less pressure on the side of the platter. It's important to have a light touch when you're doing this, and that's something that will just come with practice. And the amount of pressure that you apply to the side of the platter is going to vary depending on the torque of your turntable. If you've got a low torque turntable, then you're going to have to apply a much smaller amount of pressure to the platter because there won't be as much torque spinning the platter. So now let's talk about how to cue up your records. Well, I touched on this a moment ago, but what you need to do is you need to put the needle at the start of the record, press play, and you need to find the first kick drum on the record. There it is. So that kick drum is going to be the part of the track that we start mixing from. So let's leave that record there and let's put another record on the other deck. Let's take a quick listen to this track. So I'm actually going to start the mix with this record and I'm going to mix this record in. And to do this, you're going to need a pair of headphones. And the reason you're going to need some headphones is we need to be able to preview this deck whilst this deck is playing. And we do that by pressing the cue button for the deck that we want to listen to and cue up in the headphones. So now I can hear this record in my headphones and I can start cueing it before bringing up the volume. And this is crucial because when you're mixing using vinyl, it's going to take some time to get the track in time using the pitch control and making sure that your mix is sounding clean before you bring up the volume fader. So the headphones are a completely necessary, non-negotiable part of mixing using vinyl. Now, for the purpose of this video, I'm actually going to mix in the track on this deck with the volume up, because if I'm listening to that deck in the headphones, you're not going to be able to hear that. So that's not going to help you out. So for the purpose of this video, I'm actually going to mix from the start with the volume up so that you can hear everything that I'm doing. Now, this means it might sound like a mess at times, but when you're doing it at home, that mess that you're hearing is only going to be heard in the headphones and not out of the main speakers. Now, one of the most important parts of mixing vinyl is getting your phrasing correct. And once you know how to do this, it's actually quite simple. All dance music is structured in phrases of 32 beats. And every 32 beats, something with that track will change. That could be that the drums are taken away. That could be that a new bass line is added, or maybe some vocals come into the track. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to let this track play, and I'm going to put a counter on the screen counting along with every single beat. And I want you to just take a listen to what happens every time a new 32 beat phrase starts to happen. You're going to hear the track change. And the reason this is so important is you need to mix in every new track on phrase and start mixing at the end of every 32 beat phrase. And with enough practice, this is something that just starts to become second nature. When you see a DJ on stage and they're mixing using vinyl or even DJ software, I can guarantee you they're not counting along every 32 beats in their head. They just instinctively understand it. And with a little bit of practice, you're going to start to pick up on this in no time. So let's take a listen. And we have a new phrase in 4, 3, 2, 1. So a bass line has come into the track there. Let's take a listen to what happens on the next phrase. 4, 3, 2, 1. So that phrase actually began with a cymbal at the start of it. And that cymbal differentiates the new phrase. 4, 3, 2, 1, new phrase. So the bass line has come out now and it's introduced a piano. And the new phrase is coming in 4, 3, 2, 1. So the bass line has come back and the vocals have come in. Phrasing is so important because if you start mixing, whether that's on vinyl or with modern DJ controllers and your mixes are out of phrase, this is the quickest way of giving away that you're an amateur. And the best way to pick up on how phrasing works is to just practice mixing. So now let's start learning how to cue the record up and how to start beat matching. We're going to start with the track on the right deck and I'm actually going to mix in the track on the left deck. Now I've got the pitch control on the track that I'm mixing in at 0, and that will not be the right pitch. What I'm going to do is I'm going to show you how to cue the record up, and then I'm going to start moving the pitch control manually to try and get this track in time with this one. And this is probably the most difficult part of beat matching using vinyl, but it's also the most satisfying when you get it right. So I am going to cue this record up from this kick drum right at the start. And I'm going to perform this, which is a baby scratch. And I'm going to be doing that baby scratch in time with this track whilst it's playing. And performing this baby scratch allows me to keep time with the record, and it will allow me to let the track go by letting go of the record. So this is how you cue up a record when you're beat matching using vinyl. Baby scratch, let go. So it's worth practicing this on its own so that you can get used to the baby scratch motion and also get used to taking your hand off the record and letting it play. Let's try that again. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to play the track on the right deck, and then I'm going to cue up the track on the left deck in the way that I just showed you. Four, 3, 2, 1. So what I'm doing here is I'm getting this track in time with this track by using the pitch control and also adjusting the record manually to speed it up or slow it down. So now I've faded out the track on the right deck and left this track playing. And by the way, if you didn't know, I'm a DJ educator and I've created a full suite of DJ courses to help you develop your skills step by step. If you'd like to check those out, just click the first link in the description. So now let's talk about the beat matching process, because what you just saw me do there, using the pitch control to get this track in time with this one, and also nudging it forward and maybe bringing it back to match up the beats, that's actually the hardest part. But the process behind it is very simple. It's just that there is absolutely no shortcut to getting good at it. It just takes practice. So I'm going to start with this track with the pitch at 0. I'm going to begin playing this track and I'm going to mix this track in. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to adjust the pitch control to try and line up the beats of this track with this track. And what we're going to do is we're going to listen for the drift. We're going to listen to whether or not we need to speed this track up or slow it down. And I'm going to do this with the volume of both tracks up. But in reality, you're going to be using your headphones to listen to this track to line up the beats, because this is going to sound like a little bit of a mess. But that mess should be happening in your headphones so that the audience can't hear it. So let's start with this track. Let's find our first kick drum on this track. There it is. So we're going to baby scratch this in and let it go in 4, 3, 2, 1. So this track needs to be sped up. So we've moved the pitch control a little bit higher to speed it up. So that's not sounding too bad. So it needs to be slowed down a little bit. This is where I will rub my finger against the platter to slow it down. And we also need to slow down the pitch control as well so that the record starts playing slower. Because if you don't adjust the pitch, you could slow down the track using the platter, but the track is still going to drift out of time. And now I can hear that I need to speed this up. So there we go. That little nudge has brought it back in time. I'm going to speed it up again. So now these tracks are actually nicely in time with one another. But the thing with vinyl is these tracks are always going to drift out of time, always. So you have to be on the ball. It's something that really requires attention, and it's live and it's constantly moving. I'm going to speed this up slowly. So now I'm going to start fading out the track on the right deck, very slowly. Very slowly. So that wasn't too bad at all. The thing that is actually the most difficult is working out whether or not the track on the deck you're mixing in needs to be sped up or slowed down. And again, this just comes down to practice. One of the beautiful things about mixing real records on real turntables is that there's no hiding place. Every new record that you put on the deck is like a mathematical problem that needs solving. You need to get that pitch correct, and it really requires focus and concentration to get it right. But when you lock two tracks together and they're running at the same speed and they're mixing perfectly, it genuinely is one of the most satisfying things that you can do as a DJ. As I showed you before, there are multiple ways that you can nudge the record forward to speed it up or nudge it to slow it down. Let's play this record again. My preferred way is to rub my finger against the platter. So to slow it down, you can rub the platter this way. And if you want to speed it up, you can do it the opposite way. So you're kind of pushing the platter forward if you do it like that. You can also, like I showed you before, you can use the spindle. So you can speed it up or you can slow it down. Now, one of the methods that I use quite a lot, but I actually wouldn't recommend because it's a little bit sketchy, is I actually like to push the record by literally touching the record or tapping the record to slow it down. Now, this works for me because I've spent literally tens of thousands of hours using vinyl and using turntables, but this is a really risky way of handling the record for many reasons. But one of the main ones is you could very easily make the record skip. So if I need to speed the record up, I'll literally push the record. And if I need to slow it down, sometimes I'll tap the record. Now, for me, this works really well. And if you want to give that a go, I recommend trying it out. But if you're a complete beginner, the much safer way of doing this is to use the Platter push or pull, or to push or pull the spindle like I showed you. Even when you think you've locked two tracks together, vinyl is always going to drift out of time. Now, if you get really good at this, you can lock two records together at the same tempo, and they can play together for a minute, 2 minutes, even 3 minutes. But eventually, those two tracks will start to drift out of time. And that's why you have to be on high alert at all times when you're mixing, once you have the volume of both tracks up. Because before you know it, if you don't concentrate, you can very quickly find yourself in a situation where the mix is no longer sounding good and the tracks are not locked together. Even the very best vinyl DJs are constantly making small adjustments. Pushing the record and then adjusting the pitch slightly, or slowing the record down and then adjusting the pitch. What you'll find as well is if both of your tracks are drifting out of time, the first thing you need to do is adjust the record by either speeding it up or slowing it down. But then, because the tracks are drifting, you also have to adjust the pitch control, because if you don't, the tracks are going to drift out of time again. And if you have two tracks that were locked pretty well, you will find that you only need to adjust the pitch control a very tiny amount. Perfection is kind of impossible because we're using two analog pieces of equipment, but honestly, that's the beauty of it. So now let me show you a method for mixing, which I highly encourage you to try out. And this one is called riding the pitch. So what we're going to do is we're going to perform the same mix, but I am not going to touch the record, the spindle, the platter at all. We are only going to use the pitch control to speed up and slow down the track. And the whole purpose of this is we want to get ourselves into a position where we can speed it up, slow it down, and lock in the pitch that we need. And this is a fairly advanced skill, but it's something that I really suggest you try if you're a beginner, because this is actually going to accelerate your learning. You're going to start to understand exactly how this pitch control should move to lock two tracks together way quicker than if you were manually trying to speed it up and slow it down. At first, this is very difficult, but it is absolutely worth trying. So I'm going to line up the track on this deck. There's the kick drum. And I'm going to let it go in 4, 3, 2, 1. We're not touching this record at all. We're only using the pitch control to get it in time. So now I need to speed this track up. But the only option I have is to use the pitch. This method requires real concentration and lots of micro adjustments of the pitch control. But what you'll find is you're way more likely to get a really accurate beat mix going. So these two tracks are now locked pretty well. So now I'm going to fade out the track on the right deck. Now do bear in mind that if you're beat matching takes longer than mine to get right, that's totally fine. I've been doing this for a very, very long time, and the beat matches that I've just shown you here, I actually performed them fairly quickly, but it might take you 1, 2, 3 minutes to get the track locked into the same tempo as the track on this deck, and that is totally normal and totally fine. The most important thing is that you get the track nicely in time in the headphones before you start to bring up the volume control. Because as a pro DJ, the last thing you want is to bring in a track where the beats aren't right. This is what is called a train wreck, and it's the quickest way of giving away that you're a beginner. So that's why the headphones are crucial. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to mix 3 records back to back, and I'm going to take more time with these mixes, and I'm going to be using my headphones to cue up the records, and I'm only going to use the pitch ride method. I'm not going to touch the platter or the spindle whatsoever. I'm only going to use the pitch control to get these tracks in time. And I'm also going to use the low or the bass EQ, but nothing else, just bass EQ and the volume controls. We're only going to focus on the fundamentals. So let's take a listen. Now, if you're a beginner when it comes to mixing on turntables, here are some common mistakes to avoid. Number one, you want to make sure that you don't move the pitch control too aggressively once you start getting to a point where the tracks are sounding like they're almost locked together. I see DJs do this a lot. They'll have two tracks playing and they're almost playing at the same speed. And then I'll see a DJ do this. Well, what's happened is you've just lost the very, very small window of pitch where it was sounding pretty good. All that needed was a slight adjustment depending on whether or not the track was running too slow or too fast. And maybe it just needed a small nudge and a tiny little adjustment of the pitch. If you're mixing and you feel like the tracks are nearly locked together, just be sure to not move that pitch slider too aggressively. Otherwise, you're just going to undo all of your hard work. Next up is touching the record too hard. Let's go back to the start of this record and get that first kick drum. Now, you only need a very light touch on the record, because if we put too heavy a hand on this record, you'll stop the platter. You want to put a very light touch on the record so that the platter underneath keeps spinning. But take a look at what happens when I push down too hard. The platter stopped. So just a light touch to allow that platter to continue moving underneath. A nice light touch when you're performing the baby scratch to cue up the record. And then just let go. Another mistake I see DJs make is they panic nudge the record. So let's put this track on. They're constantly slowing it down, speeding it up. What you need to do at first, when you're getting two tracks locked in together, is you need to move the pitch control and find the rough range where that record needs to be to match up with the one on the other deck. Find that window, and that's when you can start making micro adjustments to the record, either speeding it up or slowing it down. But the moment you start mixing in the track, you want to use the pitch control to get a rough idea of where it needs to be. Maybe it needs to be all the way up here. Maybe it needs to be down here. Either way, when you first start mixing in your record, you want to figure out roughly where the pitch goes. And at that point, that's when you can start micro adjusting the record. Another mistake I see DJs make is they don't listen in their headphones for long enough before adjusting the pitch or adjusting the record by either speeding it up or slowing it down. It actually takes a little bit of time to work out whether the track needs to be sped up or slowed down, especially when you start getting to a point where the tracks are running at a very, very similar tempo. So just be sure to spend enough time listening in the headphones to work out what the record needs. Does it need to be sped up a little bit? Does it need to be slowed down? And you can only figure that out if you concentrate for enough time listening to the track in the headphones. Another mistake I see DJs make is when they're using headphones for mixing vinyl, they don't use them correctly. The best thing to do is have one headphone on and one headphone off. And that way you can listen to the track that you're queuing up in one ear, but you can still hear through your other ear what's playing out of the sound system. Now, at first, this might actually seem quite difficult to do, but very quickly, you're going to start to get used to hearing the track that you're queuing up in one ear and hearing the music that you're queuing it up against in the other ear. As I mentioned at the start of this video, it isn't easy learning to beat match on vinyl, but it is, without a doubt, one of the most satisfying ways of DJing still today in 2026. I love modern DJ controllers. I love Serato, I love Recordbox, and I love stems. And if you've been watching my channel over the past year, you'll know that the majority of what I teach is taught using modern DJ equipment, but nothing quite beats the tactile analog feel of mixing vinyl records together. And it's a skill that really doesn't have a shortcut. You just need to practice. And the more you practice, the quicker you're going to get towards your goal, and the quicker it's going to make sense. Literally every new mix that you do, you're going to understand better and better how this pitch works, how much you need to move it, how much you need to speed it up, how much you need to slow it down. All of that is going to become clearer and more obvious with every single mix that you practice. And if you'd like to see all of the skills that I've taught you in this video applied to a real DJ set, I've got a 1 hour 90s UK garage vinyl mix that you can check out by clicking right here, and it will give you a full real-time demonstration of everything you've learned in this video. My name is Blakey, thanks for watching, and hopefully I'll see you on the next one.